Bitcoin soars past 107,000, signaling a 150% growth, drawing global attention. The big question is it the new gold? Nigeria approves $37 billion budget for 2025 amid inflation concerns and growth hopes. And we'll also explore what is really holding back China's housing sector and how it impacts the broader economy. I'm Jafar Hassan with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. We begin with Bitcoin. It briefly peaked over $107,000. Now that is a statement. It signals changing tides in global finance, challenging traditional economic tools like gold and reserves. With governments and institutions watching closely, Bitcoin's momentum could spark a transformative economic era. The ripple effect is already reaching stock markets, tech sectors, and geopolitical strategies, making it the focal point of modern financial discussions. Bitcoin surge to $107,000 marks a 150% increase this year. Bitcoin-linked stocks like MicroStrategy have jumped 25%, boosting market optimism. Trump-era pro-crypto policies could make a comeback, influencing financial strategies. Now, analysts are pushing for Bitcoin to join gold in strategic reserves as a hedge against inflation. Governments adopting Bitcoin could attract investments and stabilize national currencies. Trump's past support for deregulated markets may amplify Bitcoin's role in economic policies. Now, institutional investors dominate Bitcoin trading, driving its rise and boosting confidence. Bitcoin's growth, meanwhile, aligns with NASDAQ trends, deepening its ties to traditional finance. Now, future U.S. regulations will certainly play a key role in shaping Bitcoin's economic future. For more on this, I'm joined by Josh Mahaney. He's a Scope Markets Chief Market Analyst, and he joins me live from London. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. So what impact will Bitcoin surge have on reserves?
Well, it really depends on whose reserves. I mean, you have certain actors that have a significant amount of Bitcoin. You might look at MicroStrategy in particular. Of course, the ascent of the share price has had the impact of valuing the company more heavily, or the ascent of the value of Bitcoin, but it's also provided the basis for them to be able to buy more Bitcoin. You've also got countries like El Salvador in the past mocked for the fact that they've been stockpiling Bitcoin. Well, no one's laughing now, and in actual fact, you're going to see them in a better financial position compared to those countries that have been holding assets in fiat currencies that often are whittled away through the likes of inflation, through money creation. So it really depends where you're looking at the reserves. But in terms of supply, those kind of reserves, they're not going anywhere. 21 million, that's the absolute maximum Bitcoin we're ever going to see. And certainly moving into a time where it feels like demand is rising, that limited supply really does stand Bitcoin out compared to other assets. If you look at gold, price goes up, people create more, people dig for more. We can't necessarily see the same kind of thing happen for Bitcoin.
You know, Josh, I mean, as you know, there's a debate going on whether or not Bitcoin should be included alongside gold in policies. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, people are talking about the potential for a strategic Bitcoin reserve over in the US, and it does make sense to an extent. I mean, look, ultimately, many people will say this thing's worthless. You know, this is a pet rock. But at the same time, you know, if you look at the performance over a long period of time and you look into the fact that supply isn't going anywhere, demand undoubtedly is on the rise. It is likely to be the centerpiece of the crypto sphere for many years to come. And certainly if the US wants to diversify some of its assets into something other than, say, gold, you would say Bitcoin is probably the standout benefactor of such a move. And certainly, like I said, you know, if we look over an extended period of time, the value of the dollar, the amount that a dollar can buy, only goes down. And that can't be said for Bitcoin.
Right now, Josh, Donald Trump is widely known as a pro-crypto politician. Now he's coming back to the White House on the 20th of January. Tell me, how do you think his policies might influence Bitcoin?
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, he's garnered a lot of votes on the back of being Mr. Crypto, and in actual fact, many of the people that managed to get into power over the recent U.S. election were on a similar ticket, right? And so they have to do something to justify the fact that all these Bitcoiners have essentially uh, paid through their vote for him to be able to enact something, whether that comes in the form of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, whether it just comes in terms of greater clarity over regulations, and certainly the appointment of Atkins at the SEC does point towards that. Certainly, we're going away from a period of time where businesses were essentially held back from being able to operate within the crypto sphere, and towards one where there's going to be greater clarity, greater regulations that should be good for businesses that deal within the area, but also for people that want to be able to put their money to work and be able to buy into any of these different crypto assets or crypto businesses.
Josh Mahaney, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. Really appreciate your taking out the time. Now, the next story is very important because my producer and I, we were talking about this very story because it's from his country. Nigeria's 2025 budget approval has sparked widespread debate among economists, investors, and citizens. While the increased spending aims to tackle pressing issues like infrastructure and education, it comes at a time when inflation and fiscal challenges remain high. As we explore this financial blueprint, questions linger about its potential to drive sustainable growth in Africa's largest economy. Let's have a look. Nigeria's approved 2025 budget totals $37 billion. That is a notable 14% rise from the $32.4 billion in 2024, last year. Now, this uptick highlights the government's increased spendings to address economic priorities. It reflects a commitment to funding infrastructure, education, and defense. The Nigerian Stock Exchange showed mixed signals following the budget approval. Investors are closely monitoring government spending efficiency and revenue sources. Sectors like manufacturing, energy, and construction are expected to benefit the most. Nigeria's inflation rate remains a concern, projected at 18% for 2025. While the budget signals growth, economists worry about debt servicing and fiscal balance. Effective implementation could ease economic pressures and stabilize purchasing power. All right, let's get more on this. Joining me now is Mukhtar Mohammed. He's an international finance and economic analyst. He joins me live from Lagos. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. So this is the big question here. What does the 14% budget increase mean for Nigeria's economic growth?
Thank you for having me. It depends. If you look at it last year, you say it's 14%, but if you look at it today, by the exchange rate, you could say that it has fallen down because at last year that it was 14%. The exchange rate with the government target budget at was exchange rate of 800 naira for $1, and today at the increment of 14%, or the budget, the government tagged the exchange rate for is about 1,400 for $1. That is what they think will happen. But presently now, the exchange rate is still about 1,800. So it depends. If you look at it, you could say, okay, relatively terms in terms of figure, yes, there's an increment. But when you look at it in the real term in terms of the exchange rate, then you think there's a challenge because that means we've not been able to match up revenue by the current economic challenges that we are facing, especially in regard to the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar.
Okay, now Mukhtar, another big question here is how will the 2025 budget address inflation and rising cost of living in the country? Because certainly that is a big issue for many civilians.
Yeah, thank you again. I don't think the budget, as it is, I mean, it's still in the preliminary station. You know, you still have to go through the National Assembly, and there could be addition, there could be subtraction from it. When we know the Nigerian budget, it doesn't go to the National Assembly and come back the way the executive have prepared it. So definitely, but in terms of inflation fight, I think the only way they want to fight that inflation, because Nigerian current inflation challenge is largely driven by exchange rate volatility, like I said. So the only way they can fight that is to bring down the exchange rate. And hopefully with the current exchange rate of 1,400, according to the budget, that could also signal a good intention in dealing with that. But again, like I said, when you look at inflation, what is driving inflation in Nigeria is largely cost of living, especially rising energy costs, cost of transportation, as I've talked about the exchange rate volatility, and also the insecurity in the northern part of Nigeria, which happen to be the food basket of the nation. So definitely food inflation is high in Nigeria, and it's largely driven by these factors that I've listed, especially the exchange rate, because again, 90% of over to 80 to 90% of what we consume, we import. Even when we are not importing them, we are sometimes also dealing with the machineries to make them into finished product. We import it. And the government came up with a policy that should have helped drive down inflation, which was
Right.
the removal of tariff on the food item. But that has not seen the light of the day up to this moment.
Mukhtar, what is the opportunity cost of increasing this budget? Do you think Nigeria can effectively fund this budget without increasing debt?
Definitely no. The government is already doing that already. I mean, they're already having an increment in debt servicing. They're already doing issues that have to do with debt servicing. So that's a big challenge for them already. They're already thinking of borrowing already. So definitely they cannot implement this budget because again, when you look at their revenue, I keep saying about the revenue, it's not as fantastic as we think. And also you look at oil production, which is the key driver of Nigerian revenue, at 1.7 million barrels. I mean, last budget we put it at 1.5 million barrel. We could not even achieve that, and now we are putting at 2.03 million barrel per day. That's going to be a huge challenge for the government to meet that. And oil is the major source of funding of our budget. So definitely we see those gaps. The tax law also was part of what would have helped bring in revenue into the for the government to spend to fund this budget. And as it stands now, that law is going through a lot of controversies that has not been passed. So it's going to be a huge challenge, and definitely, like you said, we cannot fund that budget without borrowing.
Right. Certainly, it's a comprehensive budget plan, and many sectors are going to take advantage from this, but one sector might take more advantage from the other. So let me ask you, what sectors, in your view, are most likely to benefit most from this government spending plan?
You see, the challenge is that since the APC government came to power, we've been having only one type of structure that we think benefits, that is in terms of infrastructure. And I think that's what the government is still going to drive. Education, yes, they have some, but infrastructure and security seems to be the key, especially with the kind of resurgence we are seeing in terms of banditry in some part of the country. And I think the government are trying to improve security and also infrastructural development, especially in the area of road transportation, power plant improvement of funding of building more power plant to make sure they have an increment in terms of having more power to reach the people, especially in the rural area. So definitely it's infrastructure and security that seems to be the key driver of this current budget. And it's not far from the truth, like I said, in security. And then when you talk about infrastructure, we're not talking about rail transportation this time. We're not talking so much about land transportation. We're not talking so much about air transportation. I think this time in terms of infrastructure, we are talking more in terms of power, how we can improve our power infrastructure so that we can generate more, we can generate more electricity for the manufacturing sector, which is a key driver of Nigerian economy.
Mukhtar Mohammed, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time. And now let's take a quick look at some other business stories from around the world. Canadian Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland resigned Monday after clashing with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over issues like U.S. tariffs. Her exit is a major blow to Trudeau's unpopular government. It came just hours before she was to present a key budget update. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc will replace her as Finance Minister. The economists say the resignation raises concerns for Canada's economy. Japanese tech giant SoftBank will invest $100 billion in the U.S., creating 100,000 jobs. The CEO of the company said Donald Trump's victory boosted his confidence in the American economy. The investment focuses on artificial intelligence and emerging technologies to reinforce U.S. industries. Donald Trump called it a monumental demonstration of faith in the country's future. Meanwhile, Donald Trump met with TikTok's boss, Xu Ziqiu, at his Mar-a-Lago residence on Monday. TikTok has asked the U.S. Supreme Court to block a law forcing its China-based parent company, ByteDance, to sell the app and face a ban by January. TikTok claims the law violates free speech rights and warns a ban could cause it to lose millions of American users. And a German-Canadian resident of China was sentenced to 2 years in a U.S. prison for stealing Tesla's EV battery trade secrets. Klaus Flugbell admitted to selling the secrets to undercover FBI agents posing as U.S. investors to produce competing EV battery equipment. Officials call the theft a threat to national security in a critical industry. Welcome back. The decline in China's property prices is slowing down. Economists say it is a sign that the economy is recovering and prices are stabilizing. So what is slowing down the housing sector? TRT World's Emre Bose has the details.
With so many homes available, yet no buyers in sight. This is a stark reminder of how bad things are in the Chinese real estate markets. The price trend is continuing downward for newly built homes, hitting negative 5.9% in October, the steepest decline in more than 9 years. The figure recovered slightly to negative 5.7% in November. It's some relief for policymakers who've been working to stabilize the real estate markets and improve consumer confidence.
In November, China's economy saw steady recovery, with the combined effects of macroeconomic policies continuing to yield positive results. The industrial and service sectors grew rapidly, while employment and prices remained stable.
Among the attempts to improve the market, officials have introduced pro-housing tax policies, lowering D taxes to 1% for those buying first and second homes that are under 140 square meters. The move helps improve demand by removing costs for property transfers. The government is also pushing for a more demand-driven economic model in the sector.
Relevant fundamental systems should be systematically established. Comprehensive reform needs to be deepened for capital markets concerning investment and financing. Bottlenecks that hinder the entry of medium and long-term funds into the market should be cleared, while inclusiveness and adaptability of the institutions within the capital market should be enhanced.
Despite these measures, the country is still going through some turbulence with GDP. Economic growth has been falling since the beginning of the year, expanding to 4.6% in the third quarter. In 2021, the peak of the real estate sector, the housing market accounted for roughly 20 to 30% of GDP. But today it's struggling. And among the core issues is massive debt levels by major property developers. Take, for instance, Evergrande. It went bust in 2021 after failing to meet its debt obligations after a dip in sales. Chinese authorities hope the sector has learned from cases like that, and they can revive the sector and build a more stable future. Emre Bose, TRT World.
For more on this, we are joined by Far Kim Bang in Kuala Lumpur. He's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Strategic Pan-Indo-Pacific Arena. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. So the thing is, the government has been trying to counter this slowdown in the housing sector. It has been engaged in multiple efforts, but the reality is the sector is not slowing down. What do you think is the stumbling block here? Okay, I think we might be having some technical glitches here. Let me see if I can. Let me just make sure if Far can hear me. Far, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So what I was asking you is that what do you think is causing China's housing sector to slow down, despite the fact that the government has been engaged in efforts to counter this notion?
Well, first of all, the slowdown is occurring at a rate that is actually slower than what many people are expecting. It has only slowed down to 0.2%, which is much lower and slower than what many people have been expecting. And it's actually across, the statistics are actually collected from across 7 cities in China, major and big cities. So the slowdown is happening and China is still on a long road to recovery. However, the prices of the property coming down is getting slower. It's not a steep decline.
But here's the thing, do you think our tax incentives like reduced deed taxes, are they enough to boost housing demand?
Well, whatever they are doing right now, they have tried big bang approach, which is try to inject a huge amount of money, verging on $1 trillion in order to resuscitate the Chinese economy and to boost the confidence. But occasionally, some of these plans are meant to allow Chinese companies to buy their shares back from the stocks. And as a result of which, you see occasional fluctuations in the policy effect that is intended.
And Var, how critical do you think is debt restructuring for developers to stabilize the market?
Well, China has been able to weather this crisis over the last 3 years, the property crisis that is. And given the fact that there are many Chinese who actually anticipate this crisis in order to make themselves more able to buy those homes at a lower prices, I think you have a very unique situation where you have a lot of inventory from the Chinese property developers, but you don't have enough consumers willing to go into the market to consume and absorb those listed properties.
All right, Far Kim Bang, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. I really appreciate your taking out the time.
Thank you.
After dealing with months of blackouts, Cubans now face severe fuel shortages. Many gas stations have closed, leaving drivers stuck in long queues across Havana. Officials blame the U.S. embargo and reduced fuel shipments from places like Venezuela. Omar Bakalulu reports.
More than 60 years ago, Fidel Castro's socialist revolution brought sweeping change to Cuba. The regime promised equality and access to essentials, from free education to affordable fuel. But today, the small Caribbean island is facing its worst economic crisis since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Gasoline and diesel have become scarce commodities. In Havana, drivers wait in long lines for a chance to fill up, while gas stations across the country remain closed.
The energy and fuel supply difficulties we face are a result of the unprecedented tightening of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade by the United States government.
While officials blame U.S. sanctions, Cubans say the reality is far more painful on the ground.
It's been 3 days counting today that we have been here waiting for fuel to arrive. Yesterday, fuel ran out in the morning and no more has arrived. They say another tanker is expected. People have slept here in line so they don't miss their turn.
Earlier this year, the government introduced a dollar-based fuel pricing system, halting subsidies in an attempt to raise foreign currency. Officials claim the move would stabilize fuel supplies, but that promise has yet to materialize.
We used to make purchases using the local currency, and there were lines back then as well, but they were acceptable. Now the lines are endless, and I switched to dollars thinking it would be faster. It used to be daily refueling, but that's not the case anymore. We've been waiting 3 days for the tanker to arrive.
The fuel shortage is just one part of a broader economic crisis. Recent months have seen 3 nationwide blackouts that left millions in darkness, forcing the government to close schools and halt non-essential industries temporarily. Havana says the economic blockade has caused $164 billion in damage over the last 6 decades. With little relief in sight, Cubans are now forced to adapt to yet another chapter of economic struggle. Omar Bakalulu, TRT World.
And that's all your business news for now. I'm Jafar Hasnan. Thank you very much for watching.